Now, I haven't talked about reparations on this channel before, but probably out of everything I've ever talked about on this channel, reparations is the dumbest idea that exists. I'm going to talk about, and I'm happy to defend it. If you disagree, go in the comments. I'd be happy to defend it. Reparations is just such a stupid, idiotic concept. I can't even believe that there are people on the left. I can believe that there's like 2% of people on the left, but the fact that there's a big push for this, especially in San Francisco, which I'm going to talk about today, it is beyond me, and I don't understand how they believe it's a winning issue, especially when there's a lot of evidence that a large portion of African Americans don't even support it. Now, the leading reparations plan is in San Francisco right now. Let me lay out for you what San Francisco wants to do with reparations. I'm just going to read it off. It's got like 4 components to it, okay? So basically what a reparation is it sounds like the word repair. If you didn't know, a reparation is to simply give money back to a disenfranchised group because of an atrocity that happened in the past. So reparations were talked about during the Holocaust. Organizing Israel and giving it to the Jews was in many ways a form of reparation. I want to talk really quick about the title sponsor of this podcast, gulagamerica.com. Here's the deal, guys. I'm very passionate about the United States not becoming like France. I don't want them to be like France. I don't want them to be like Europe. They have so many problems. Gulags, that's a big problem. That's why I partnered with Gulag America. Gulag America can hook you up with high quality apparel and clothing. Founded by an Army and Reserve veteran, Gulag America has t-shirts, long sleeves, and hoodies that are great for both men and women. Here's a question for you regarding France and Russia. Do you even know what a gulag is? I recently had a conversation with some family. None of them knew what it is. Often the term gulag refers to literal slave encampments in Russia. But as I've talked about on this podcast, there are gulags that are not necessarily physical, but the media, the military industrial complex, that are gulags and that are imprisoning us here in America. I'm talking about these every day so that we can fight them. So is Gulag America. For a limited time, if you use my code JoshCar10, you will get 10% off at gulagamerica.com. Again, that's JoshCar10 for 10% off at gulagamerica.com. It is the warning, not the wish, so that we can fight them and keep America free. Again, link in the description down below, gulagamerica.com. Now, in the San Francisco, what they're calling for is a reparation for African Americans in California. One thing I didn't even write in my notes, which is really crazy, is that California never even practiced slavery. They were always a free state. So I don't know what they're trying to repair. I guess they're speaking for the rest of the United States that was involved in slavery. But in any case, this is what they're calling for just in the state, just in the city of San Francisco. Every black citizen over the age of 18 would get $5 million up front, $5 million, a guaranteed salary of $96,000 a year for 250 years. Okay, so for as long as the country has existed, they're going to give $96,000 every year to black citizens and their posterity in San Francisco. Housing must be guaranteed to each African American for $1. I don't know what that mortgage would look like. And it would eliminate personal debt. Okay, so credit card debt, done. I assume that would also include student loans. So they're eliminating debt, they're giving free housing, $5 million, and a guaranteed $96,000. That's like crazy. That's like winning the lottery. Like, you can't even go on a game show and win something like that. Like, that's insane. And they're promising that to every African American. The Hill wrote, I really love this. The Hill wrote this, to paraphrase Margaret Thatcher, the Democrats eventually will run out of other people's money. I really love that. Like, they're going to run out of money. That is an obscene amount of money to give away. There isn't enough income in California to pay for these reparations. And so they floated different ideas of taxation in order to get it done. They could, there's a world in which they could tax it and get it done. I'm not saying that this is completely impossible, But I want to talk about right now why reparations are so ridiculous. Now that we have on the table what they're trying to do in San Francisco, let me lay out a few reasons why reparations do not make any sense whatsoever. The idea that I have a responsibility for the actions of my ancestors is completely ridiculous. I don't understand, like, how would they justify that? I don't understand how anyone can suddenly be responsible for the actions of someone else, especially when you're thinking about it in a reverse way. There's a little bit of an argument to be said that someone has a responsibility for the actions of their posterity. Now, I don't even fully believe that still, but in a way, it's like if there's trouble children, sometimes you can look at the parents and be like, yeah, the parents didn't do a great job, okay? But they're talking about it in the reverse order. They're saying somehow, even though I never met them, my ancestors, I have a responsibility for what they did. Just on its face, it makes no sense. Going further into that, it brings up a lot of questions. Let me bring up some questions, some really legitimate questions. And if you guys know anyone who's pro reparations, I would love to talk about them, to talk about it with them. I would love to talk about these questions and just ask, like, in a really genuine way, how they justify these things. Here's a few questions for people who are pro reparations. How far back do we go with reparations? It seems that people have kind of nebulously chosen 250 years. But my question is, if you believe in reparations, why not go back 1,000 years? Why not go back 3,000 years? The problem with that is if you go back far enough, everyone has probably had ancestors that's been enslaved or disenfranchised in some way, especially considering pretty much everyone was enslaved at one point. I mean, the amount of slaves today is way higher, but the amount, like, per capita of slaves is way higher back then. There was if you had 1,000 people randomly, like 999 of them would have been in serfdom or slavery. One of them was not. That's one question to ask. The other question is, what about Black Americans with no genealogy of African slaves? So I'm talking about people who live in San Francisco. They're Black, they're African, and their ancestors were never enslaved. Maybe they were from Eastern Africa. They stayed in Eastern Africa. None of them came over. And then as soon as slavery was illegal, one of their ancestors came over. Do they still somehow get reparations? If that's true, then what are you actually repairing? Is it slavery or is it something deeper? Next question. What about Africans who had slaves themselves, or if they brokered deals in West Africa and trafficked them to the United States? Most of the time, when the Europeans were bringing people from West Africa over to the Americas, what was going on is there were Africans there that were brokering these deals. They were capturing their own people and selling them to Europeans. Are you telling me that those people, and then of course there were just slave owners that were Black in America, are you telling me that those people, the posterity of those people, also somehow get a reparation even though they benefited from slavery? Finally, the last question that I have, that is probably the most moral, like the biggest moral quandary in all of this, is what about Africans who, I guess I should say, let me say it this way. Are you saying that reparations eliminate the sin of slavery? All of us agree at this point that there was a serious sin committed when Africans were brought over in the slave trade and were enslaved. All of us agree that. So if we're repairing it, are we saying that this is atoning for the sin that America participated in during slavery? If not, if you're saying no, we can't possibly atone for that, then what is the price? At what point, should we give 10 million to the people in San Francisco? 20 million? Like, why stop at 5 million? Shouldn't we really atone for the evil thing that we did? There is no answer. It's impossible. It's impossible to put a dollar amount to what was lost during slavery and the sin that was committed. Christians believe that the only person that can atone for that is Jesus Christ. That makes, if you believe in a higher power, that's the only way that you can atone for a sin as bad as slavery. And of course, we can repent for it if we participated in it. But if you didn't have slaves, you don't need to repent for it. It's not our job to repent for what our ancestors did. And so my point is, if you guys are trying to like level the playing field, like if you're trying to just say like we want to do something to make it so slavery basically didn't happen, I don't think $5 million check is the answer. I think the answer comes from a higher power, and I don't even think they would be able to argue that $5 million is enough to somehow justify enslaving a race for hundreds of years. One thing that's important is that just to understand about my argument, like the reparations are silly on an economic level for sure. It's going to destroy the economy in California, and it would trickle over to the rest of the United States. But it's mostly just silly on a justice level. It does not do anyone any service to give them that kind of money. It's probably not going to increase the quality of their life, and it doesn't give justice to their ancestors who were enslaved. Many Black Americans don't want reparations, as I've brought up. And the most important thing about this is that, and this is really important for people to understand, this is constantly in my head all day when I'm thinking about the political atmosphere in America. Democrats have an impossible incentive system. Let me break it down. Because Democrats are the social welfare party, because they are the party of fixing poor people's problems. That's what they do, right? Social welfare is their thing. That is what they've marketed themselves to be. Because that is their shtick, they cannot do their job. If they do their job, then they're out of a job. Their incentive structure does not work. And that's really important to recognize from a party, because I'm not, like, I understand any party, they're in it for power. Republicans, Democrats, Green Party, Libertarians, all of them, they're in it for power. But here's the deal. Look at their incentive system. If everyone is helped out and all the poor people are good, all the social welfare is given out, no one's going to vote Democrat. Democrats need people like that. Therefore, they have no incentive to actually fix their problems. Over time, people who succeed in America tend to go Republican. So Democrats would be putting themselves out of business, essentially. They know this. They're not dumb about this. They know it. Therefore, they will not do what helps the lower class. If they do, they will lose their voting base completely. They'll give small handouts, maybe even big handouts, and these handouts are not going to increase the quality of life of these people. We've seen it over and over again. The thing that will increase the quality of life of these people is taking responsibility for their lives and getting out of crap hole cities like San Francisco. That is what's going to increase the quality of their life. Reparations are pretty much the dumbest thing that could possibly happen in San Francisco, and I pray that it doesn't get brought up on a national scale. I really think it'll get shot dead in the water. No Republican will support it, and even like half the Democrats are kind of against it because they know it goes against their incentive structure, and it just sounds ridiculous on its face.